We're left in America with the deep and abiding embarrassment of the Capitol basically being sieged and ransacked by Trump supporters. The President of the United States has seeded the country for the past, several months now, in an election that he lost, continuously saying that he did not lose the race, that he won this race and that it was being stolen from him. To go further, his lawyers arguing that Hugo Chavez, or the ghost of Hugo Chavez, Nicolas Maduro, the Cubans, with the blessing of China, working with Governor Kemp in Georgia, stole this election using voting machines that apparently have logic that will take it from Trump and give it to Biden. They've used this logic despite losing in one court case after the next for months. Donald Trump supposedly is a billionaire. He has all of these other millionaires and billionaires that are backing him, paying for private investigators, not to mention the faculties of the U.S. government in and of itself, since it's still under his control, and yet have not been able to find any of the stuff. They haven't been able to substantiate any of their claims in one court of law after the next. But that doesn't matter. The fact that he's saying is in and of itself enough for his supporters to try to overturn the election results, to attack the Capitol, to siege in respects to the Capitol, and understand by definition the the seditious action in regards to what they're doing. Donald Trump lost an election. These guys are fighting, toppling, and going over the cops that are there in pursuit of Trump, who, again, lost the election, and in the weirdest of ironies, screaming that all of this is in order to stop the steal. To stop the steal. It looks like the steal is that. This back and forth. Ransack the premises of the Capitol. This includes sitting or trashing Pelosi's office. This includes this guy in a mask with horns on and face paint running through the Capitol. The images that were coming out yesterday were just embarrassing. I mean, you basically have, supposedly, the free world, the capital of the free world, not able to defend itself from protesters. These are the same people that spend $1 trillion on military. These are the same people that would have tanks and Humvees and all of these vehicles coming from the battlefield riding on the streets of America. The rubber bullets, the stun gun, the grenades, all of those things that was being used at other protests, either for Black Lives Matter in the various states and even in the Capitol when Donald Trump wanted to get his photo out with the Bible. They had no issue attacking, using batons, stun grenades, flashbang. All of those things were being brought to bear upon the citizenry of the United States, protesting its government, protesting blacks being shot. What did they say about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee? Unacceptable behavior. But what is this? A bunch of right-wingers, many of which racist, many of which in right-wing paramilitary organizations, descending upon the Capitol as senators decide and select the next president of the United States, be it Joe Biden. Donald Trump encouraged this behavior. This behavior is directly related to Trump and the other Republicans that back Trump, and to this idea that Trump lost or won an election, that all evidence point to that he actually and entirely lost. This is C-SPAN covering people moseying into the White House. By the way, you can't even entirely make the assessment that they broke in. Breaking in insinuates that they had to fight the cops to do it, that they had to push these things. No. There's video footage of the cops basically letting these guys into the building. There's always this affinity between cops and right-wingers, and I pointed out all the time, even though some people disagree with me when I say it. The people who are screaming, defund the police, do you think the cops will be more or less for that? Well, of course they're going to be against it because they are the cops. Beyond being more or less for that, when you have people who basically agree in this kind of repression, who agree in pushing back against, let's say, like Black Lives Matter or some of these left-wing organizations, cops are just human beings with a badge on. The human being that's underlying, that's there, has its own political point of view and political opinions. Right here, look at this. It is ridiculous to pretend as if cops aren't human beings and aren't people. And as such, will have political disposition that trends on one side or the other. Garland was on earlier today that got across that political disposition decidedly often is to the right. Take a look at this. This is another video that was put out. There are all sorts of videos on these events. And this is one where it looks like the cop is letting...
They're squabbling with protesters. Oh, there we go.
Let's look at this again. One more time. Barricades. There's cops. They got police on them. Let them in. All right, let's make this work. All right, guys, come on. Let's do our damage. Let's do our stuff. Yeah. Like I said, those protesters don't get in unless the cops allow it. I am not the only one who came to that assessment. Apparently, a lot of other people came to that assessment, understanding this affinity between right-wingers and cops. Other people also made the connection that maybe they didn't break themselves in. Maybe it wasn't just incompetence. Maybe there was on some level agreement. I am not the only one that took that disposition. Joe Scarborough on Morning Joe this morning lost it, going so far as to drop an F-bomb on national television about what he saw taking place. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. This clip from Scarborough is not long, but I think it gets across a certain discomfort that Scarborough may have. Keep in mind, these guys got their position, meaning Scarborough was a politician himself, based on the way the system is currently structured. The system is not entirely real. It's entirely conceptual, and if it crumbles and falls, then the powers and the abilities, even the wealth that many of the people who went through Congress and everything else had, evaporates, because all of that stuff is under the confines of this particular system. I hope you understand what I mean by that. Money or political clout, your position as a congressman, all of those things are entirely dependent upon the system to which you are in. And if there is leadership change, if there's a coup, if the system implodes, then all of the position, all of the wealth that these people had up to this point, providing they're not part of the new whatever comes after, will go up in smoke. I would imagine Scarborough has a certain discomfort in watching this. Americans in general probably have some discomfort in watching this. Basically, the government of the United States, with all of the money and all of the wealth and all of the military and all of the police, weren't able to protect Capitol Hill. Let's hear Scarborough. And actually, that's wrong. They were able to protect it. Maybe it's more accurate to say they just didn't. This is Scarborough.
If these insurrectionists were black, they would have been shot in the face. And my God, if these insurrectionists were Muslim, they would have been sniped from the top of buildings. So I want to know from the Capitol Hill police, what is it? Is it just white people? Or is it Donald Trump supporters? Why do you scream at people for walking across the street 3 blocks away from the Capitol? Why are you known as badasses around the Capitol? But then Trump supporters come in and you open the fucking doors for them. Oh my God. You open the doors for them and let them breach the people's house. What is wrong with you? If these
Wow. I want to hear that again. That's pretty badass. And by the way, I very rarely do I agree with Scarborough, but on this, Scarborough is right. The weird part is the tribalism stuff has ended up with people drawing distinctions or drawing sides. That's not just on the left, unfortunately, with either the forced to vote stuff or the people who are against the forced to vote stuff. Both of those positions. Well, the forced to vote stuff, of course, I agree with it, even though I have my qualms with how it was pushed and the cancel culture that came away from it. But that position doesn't fall within either of those positions, which makes it somewhat of an uncomfortable position to have, but I think it's, at least for me, honest. But something similar has happened with Republicans, with the notion of Trump and whether or not they're going to stand by this idea that Trump won the election and that this is being stolen, that he won by magnificent numbers, and that those magnificent numbers just aren't there because the Democrats and Hugo Chavez's ghosts are stealing those numbers. Well, you've had Mitch McConnell, you've had Mitt Romney, and Joe Scarborough, these classic establishment Republicans basically saying no. Mitch McConnell yesterday gave a speech that was actually pretty profound. And the speech was actually on point. It's probably one of the most empathetic and honest things that I've heard Mitch McConnell ever say. And basically, McConnell's point was, look, the Democratic Party tried to steal and tried to delegitimize the election for 3 years. We've been against their efforts and screaming that the Russians stole this election. I'm paraphrasing. And we should be against it now. We can't just immediately flip on a dime after pushing back against Democrats, screaming about it for 3 years or 4 years, to all of a sudden become that party, to be the party that screams about theft, just like the Democrats did. It was embarrassing and horrible when they did it. We're not going to take up the mantle. It was fascinating to hear that speech from McConnell, because McConnell could actually be honest in order to push back against coalitions and factions that were being dishonest for the pursuit of power. My issue here is dishonesty, disingenuousness in pursuit of an objective, because I feel that the energy is very, very problematic. These guys basically ransacked the Capitol with Trump supporters giving it a pass, saying that it's okay because the reason they ransacked it was the election. The election was stolen from us, so it gives us reason to pretty much ransack the Capitol and push back on it. Well, Scarborough is basically saying that is bullshit, and I suspect his anger and his hyperbolic level of his rage lies there. You guys are lying about this race being stolen. You guys don't care about America, despite the fact you're saying stop the steal, because if you did give a shit about America, you wouldn't be ransacking the Capitol. And more importantly, acting as if Donald Trump won the race when you had like 3,900 people die from COVID yesterday creates this kind of weird reckoning that the guy who is president, while 300 or 400,000 people dropped dead, you're trying to keep that guy in office. This is problematic on so many counts. But Scarborough's rage on this is fascinating to behold. I want to hear that one more time. Let's do this once more.
If these insurrectionists were black, they would have been shot in the face. And my God, if these insurrectionists were Muslim, they would have been sniped from the top of buildings. So I want to know from the Capitol Hill police, what is it? Is it just white people? Or is it Donald Trump supporters? Why do you scream at people for walking across the street 3 blocks away from the Capitol? Why are you known as badasses around the Capitol? But then Trump supporters come in and you open the fucking doors for them. Oh my God. You open the doors for them and let them breach the people's house. What is wrong with you?
I also think what Scarborough probably recognizes is that the people who got in could have had guns. They could have had some kind of chemical agents. They could have had bombs. They could have had some other kind of weapons. They could have been trying to take members of Congress hostage. They could have shot or injured some of the members that were there. I mean, these people did do tend to be gun nuts. I mean, the fact of the matter is once they breach the quote unquote people's house, all of this stuff becomes fair game. And you lose all control over what takes place. And at that point, you are at the mercy of the people who basically taken over that house. And the fact that you've had congressional members and everything else there while this was taking place makes that much more disastrous and that much more of a failure. Yeah, he has a right to be pissed off. The America as a whole has a right to be pissed off that the quote unquote people's house was allowed to be defiled in this way. This was sedition. It was an attempted takeover by definition. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, but is it really hyperbolic? The President of the United States is saying that the election was stolen. Not just stolen, that he won in a landslide and that it was just stolen. The people who are there are basically trying to overturn the results of the election. They're trying to say that millions, tens of millions of people that voted don't matter, and that this was their way of doing it. The cops who were there, on some level, some of them had to have at least agreed, at least 2 or 3 enough to let the people into the building to ransack the building. Yeah, there should be investigations in all of this because there was a level of failure on so many levels. But I trend towards the side that this was not incompetence. This was intentional will. And Scarborough has a right to be pissed. I think what Scarborough needs to, however, accept on some level is that maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it wasn't a fuck up. Maybe with the level of the expectation of what was going to take place, meaning from a standpoint of all of these people coming, maybe it is infinitely foreseeable that something like this was going to happen where a huge mass of people was going to show up. And maybe it wasn't the infinitely foreseeable part. Maybe it was conscious will and intent that allowed those people to ransack that building. Like, share, and of course, subscribe.